Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Lou Kayser. If you're a football fan, you'll love her podcast, Play Your Position. Today, we're going to discuss what is a rippler? How do you become a rippler? Do you even want to become a rippler? And if you're not rippling, you should be rippling.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performers Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. Tell me some of the best advice you've ever received.
Oh my gosh. Oh, the best advice I've ever received. I would have to say, I guess, you know what? It's funny, Thor. I don't seek advice all that often from other people. I tend to turn to books. When I was in college, I entered college with a double major. I was planning to become a doctor, so I entered pre-med, but I also wanted to major in English because I've always loved books and writing and my experiences in an English classroom. Organic chemistry and calculus both took me off of that game my first semester. I entered college and was assigned an advisor in the math department, and halfway through the term, he brought me in and he said, you know, you're not doing so well in this class. And I'm like, oh, really? I wouldn't have noticed. And realized that was my exit point. So I switched advisors to the professor who was my freshman 101 writing, and his name was Hans Ostrom. He was a first-year professor. And over the years that I was there, I would go in for advising. And about midway through college, I said, you know, I really think I want to be a teacher, and I'm not sure what classes I should take. And he said, Mary Lou, let me give you some advice. Take only the classes as an undergraduate that interest you. Go to graduate school to get your teaching certification. Thor, that was tremendous advice because it freed me up from thinking I had to take these practical classes in education in order to become a teacher, and it allowed me to explore music theory. It allowed me to take a semester abroad and live in London. It allowed me to just be Mary Lou and not worry so much about my future, just worry about right now. And I graduated with, great grades and lots of tremendous experiences in the classroom. A year and a half later, I was in grad school for teaching. It all worked out.
Great advice. You wrote a book about storytelling. Tell us a little bit about that.
My most recent book project, The Ones Who Believed. And it's a collection of true inspirational stories honoring everyday people who took a chance, shaped a life, and made a difference. I was hired originally to be the ghostwriter of that book. And about 2/3 of the way through the project, my client said, you know what, you have just done such tremendous work here. I want you to be on the cover. And so she gave me co-author status. And it was truly an honor. That collection of stories showcases the power of people believing in us at various points in our life, being able to see something in us before we can see something in ourselves, or just being that force that at times during our journey, we just can't do it. We can't do whatever it is we're about to do if it weren't for that force, that believing in us. And again, it's not this grand confetti dropping and the band marching. Those moments are often very subtle. Many people don't think about them until they're asked that question. And that, I think, was one of the biggest takeaways from the project. It was the physiological transformation that every single storyteller had during their recounting of the story of the person when they were honoring that person who believed in them. It was phenomenal. It happened to me. I have a story in there as I was remembering my 9th grade English teacher who had a tremendous impact on my life at a time when I could not have been lower in so much was going on. I mean, that's such a turbulent time for many of us. Early adolescence is so tough, especially for girls.
Yeah.
Not that it isn't for boys.
It's more difficult for women.
It's different. Yeah. It's different because we mature faster, and the whole sex thing comes in.
Yep.
Wow. It just changes the dynamic of everything. You asked me about the book, and so putting that out into the world, I felt is so, again, in alignment with what I stand for, which is stories. And what's neat about the book is it's not just one of these, oh, that's a nice collection of stories. It actually has calls to action in the back. We deliberately created a book we wanted people to interact with and actually execute, to use your word.
I love it.
Go thank the person, acknowledge the person who believed in you. Even if that person is no longer alive, you can still do it. You could put a post on Facebook. You could write a letter that you tuck away in a box. You could tell them the things you wished you had. And if that person is alive, honor them in some way. We give templates in the back of, if you're not a writer, and a lot of people aren't, how do you start? Well, here's a take our template, just copy it and put your language in, your names. We give hashtags a way to honor people through, again, this new vehicle of communication: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat. Make a video, take a selfie, turn the camera on yourself and talk for 2 minutes about the person who believed in you, and then post it. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we can honor those who have believed in us. And what's really interesting, Thor, is since I got involved with that project, I have picked up so many times, particularly in athletics, because I do watch a lot of sports, of how prevalent that term of thanking someone who believed. I mean, Deshaun Watson just did it the other night when he was talking to the reporter afterwards. He said, I couldn't have done this without coach believing in me or my mom believing in me. And I thought, there it is again. It's everywhere, but it's so obvious sometimes we don't think about it. We don't think about it for ourselves. Like, who has believed in me?
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. I interviewed Steve Wallace, 3-time Super Bowl champion for San Francisco. He was the blind side tackle for Montana. And he goes around to schools and he talks to kids in high school and about leadership and so forth. And he shares a story that twice, he must be a fast driver, twice he got pulled over in Lower Georgia going to his lake house by police. And they were students that he had spoken to at one point in his life. And,
oh my gosh.
And he shares the story of actually giving it back. I think one of the things was, your decisions have consequences. And the cop's like, Mr. Wallace, decisions have consequences. You were speeding. I bring that up because things that you do have a rippling effect. It might not be apparent right away, but you can make a huge impact on anybody's life, but specifically kids. I mean, there's a time in kids' lives that the right things said, you can have a huge impact on the direction of their life.
Well, I want to point out something. First of all, I do want to give a shout out to Karen Lopez McWilliams, who conceived of this project and approached me to help her initially with just planning it, and then said, I'd really like to bring you on. I need a ghostwriter, and things evolved. And so it was the last 18 months of my life, Thor, were really devoted to two things: my podcast and the Ones Who Believed project. And it's funny that you bring up the ripple effect, because that's we coined a phrase called Rippler. And a Rippler is somebody who does make an impact on the world by just being who they are and dropping that proverbial pebble into the pond of life. And what's cool about, if you look at the ripple effect from a scientific point of view, the ripple that goes out actually sends energy back to the original source. So there's not just you're putting it out into the world, but you will get back that energy somehow, some way. And that probably was one of, we had 3 or 4 top insights that came out of that project. And that was one of them. And it was just, again, I'm getting chills right now thinking about it.
Well, let's add to those chills. Is there a story from the book that you want to share with the audience?
I loved all the stories. I'll just start by that. But one of my favorite stories, not only to hear the interview, because what she would do is she would record the interview and then I would get the raw file and turn it into a narrative. One of my favorite stories from the book is one called Nothing But the Best by a man named Robert Heyman. Now, Robert Heyman grew up in Beverly Hills, California, in the lap of luxury. His father was actually the man who started Giorgio of Beverly Hills, huge worldwide brand in the fashion industry. And what I loved about Robert's story is that he honored two men. He honored his father, but he also honored his maternal grandfather, who came to America as an immigrant from Hungary with nothing in his pocket, that proverbial story of the immigrant, and made a life for himself, became a very successful farmer in a town called Mansfield, Ohio. And for his little area, he was very successful. And as a child, Robert would visit his grandfather during the summer, and he learned how to work from his grandfather. He learned how to plant fields. He learned how to take care of animals. His grandfather, he loved his grandfather. He says, I'd follow him around the farm like a little puppy dog and just wanted to be with him all the time. And his grandfather would tell stories, and Robert would just sit in absolute awe of all these stories. And every time he had to leave to go back to California, his grandfather would take him to the train station and stand on the platform. And Robert, as a little kid, would look out of the window just crying and seeing his grandfather waving goodbye with tears in his eyes. And it was one of the highlights of his life. And so he grew up in two very different worlds. He most of the year, he again was in that Beverly Hills environment. But what really made him who he is were the lessons that he took from the farm in Ohio from his grandfather. Both his father and his grandfather told him in their own way, Robert, never settle for less than the best from yourself. Never expect anything less than the best from yourself, no matter what you do in this life. And I just love that advice. I love that mantra, if you will. And Robert is one of the most humble, unassuming people, has raised a family in this, again, very luxurious kind of world with a lot of money, but he's managed to keep things simple and not get caught up in the drama of that machine that we know as Hollywood. Just phenomenal human being. And he himself has been very successful in real estate and other kinds of businesses, but even keeled, the kind of guy that can move in and among any group and just assimilate beautifully.
That's beautiful. I have a thought that almost haunts me in a good way, and that is hell on earth would be to meet the man I could have become.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
That gets you.
Yeah, that was actually told to me from a mentor that I met 10 years ago. And yeah, it was like, oh, that's the coolest phrase ever. And it's like, oh, there's a lot of weight. Even when I say it, I get kind of choked up.
I'm feeling it. I'm stealing that.
Say
woman.
It's a blessing and a curse.
It is, isn't it?
It really is. But it does drive me. And I think about the actions and the habits that I'm forming. I've got a statue here in my office, and it's a man carving himself out of a block of granite with a chisel and a hammer. It reminds me every day to wake up and chip away all those things that are not part of me or should not belong, don't need to stay. Similar to Michelangelo forming David. That's how he formed him. Chipped away everything that wasn't David.
Oh, yes. I love that.
Take it, steal it, and then don't hate me in 10 years when you say, I can't get that out of my mind. If you had the opportunity to interview someone for an hour, dead or alive, who would it be, and what would you ask him or her?
Oh, my goodness. Meryl Streep. She's one of my heroes, and I know there's some controversy over her after her Golden Globes acceptance speech, especially the football comment. I have admired and looked up to Meryl Streep since I was 16 years old. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, I've been told since I was 16 years old that I resemble Meryl Streep. I've been mistaken. People have stopped me on the street thinking I am her. There is definitely some resemblance. It's not exact, but we are doppelgangers, if you will. I also share her name. She is Mary Louise, and I am Mary Louise as well, but she's Meryl and I'm Mary Lou. So that backstory, I just think she epitomizes the things that I stand for. She is herself. She shows up. She works very hard. She sets the bar incredibly high, not only for herself, but for those who work with her. She has raised 4 unbelievably talented, successful, original human beings. She has had a marriage that worked for probably 30 plus years now. I'm not sure how long she and her husband have been married. She's worked very hard to make that marriage work, and I admire that. I mean, my parents have been married for 55 years. It's something that I will not experience myself, but I admire people that can make that relationship work. What would I ask her?
Yes.
I would ask her what she looks forward to when she wakes up each day. I would ask her about her own routines and habits. How does she play her position? Her position as Meryl Streep, not just the private citizen, but the global brand. How does she reconcile those two very different yet powerful positions? And I would ask her about what she loves about being a mom. You know, mom to mom. What worked for you? What challenged you? Now that your kids are grown, as I'm entering that next phase of motherhood where they won't need me in the same way. What would you share?
Beautiful. What do you wish you had started earlier, knowing what you know now? If you had an opportunity to go back and start something earlier, what would it be?
There's so many things. My mind is swirling. You know what I would have started earlier? I would have started believing in myself as an entrepreneur and as somebody who can go out and actually make sales happen. I've struggled with that. I'm so good at so many things. I celebrate the things that I'm really good at. And knowing now what I know about business, I would have hit the ground running way harder than I did in the beginning.
That's fair. And you know what I love about this, you just brought this up, is the way you get good at something is just do it and do it and do it and make adjustments and do it and do it and do it. And so many people get caught up in this mindset of, okay, when I get good at it, then I'll start doing it. That's not the way life works. You got to do it first and do it poorly. I always joke around. I said, if you want to hear a really poor podcast, go ahead and listen to my first couple episodes. And I started my podcast, we were talking about this earlier on your show, after listening to John Lee Dumas's first episode. I turned his on and I'm like, oh man, that's bad.
I know. It's so crazy to listen to.
Yes, but that's what prompted me to pull the trigger. Because I'm like, oh, he's got to be awesome right from the beginning. Nope, he wasn't. And I was going to actually change mine. And I was going to change it, redo it, right? Because I'm better now than I was back then. And I'm like, no, I've got to leave that to not only remind myself where I came from, but that's the way it happens. You've just got to get in the game and just do it poorly until it gets better. So
absolutely. Amen.
I love that. We're all looking for the secret to happiness, success, wealth, being healthy and wise. If you had to answer the question, what's the secret to success and happiness and all of those, what would it be?
Accepting who you are for who you are, loving yourself. There's 7 billion people in the world and only one of you. That's amazing. What a gift. What an absolute gift to the world that you're here. There's no one else like you with your set of skills and experiences and viewpoints. And there's a reason you're here. Love who you are. Embrace your life. It goes by really fast.
Yeah, and play your position.
Play your position. Show up and play your position, not the position you think your mother, your father, the kid down the street, a teacher one day said. Play your position. Be fully 100% you.
Yeah.
That's how you succeed. That's how you're happy.
There was a punt returner or a kickoff returner in the NFL years ago. I forget what his name is. I forget who he played for, but that doesn't matter. All this guy did, he was a track star. And he'd get the ball, and all he did is ran straight ahead as fast as he could. And he was a little guy, and he used to get killed. And, I mean, he did nothing to avoid. He just ran as fast as he could straight ahead. That was his move. And he had a very successful career. He wasn't trying to figure out how to get cute. That was him. Mm-hmm. He played that position. That's what he was good. And he just ran fast, and he ran straight ahead. And he'd run into things, but that's what it was. And if he tried to be something else, he never would have been successful. So great.
True story.
Great advice. Thank you so much for listening today. I really do appreciate your time, and I hope you found today's show valuable. If you would like to receive these shows automatically to your phone or to your computer, simply go to iTunes and subscribe. After listening to several of the shows, if you're so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating, as this helps us reach additional people and spread the message. If you're truly committed to taking your life to the next level and doing whatever it takes to become a peak performer, but something's holding you back, something is blocking your way, and you just can't seem to figure out what it is? Send me an email to info@thorconklin.com, and I'd be more than happy to get on the phone with you. We'll schedule a 15-minute discovery call. No obligation, no cost. I absolutely love to hear from the listeners, and if there's something I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to do that. Also, if you found something of great interest in today's show and you want to share that with your friends and family, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode, hit the share button, and share it on your page. You can follow me at Twitter @Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. We're constantly adding new free resources, discussing additional tricks, tips, tools, and strategies on how to be a peak performer. Remember, I try to keep these episodes short so you can listen to them during dot time, doing other things, commuting, driving, walking, working out. Decide to be a peak performer in all that you do. And until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day. That concludes part 2 of our interview with Lou Kayser. Please tune in later this week for the conclusion, part 3.